You open your retirement account on a random Tuesday. The number is bigger than it was last year. It's bigger than it was 5 years ago. You've been retired for a while now, and somehow, the balance keeps climbing. That should feel good. But it doesn't quite make sense. Here's the strange part almost nobody tells you. Most retirees don't run out of money. They die with most of it still sitting there, untouched. Researchers at the Employee Benefit Research Institute tracked thousands of retirement accounts for over 2 decades. What they found surprised even them. After 18 years of retirement, the average retiree had spent down only about a quarter of their savings. Not a quarter per year, a quarter total. Some retirees with modest nest eggs were withdrawing less than 1% a year, far below what they could safely afford to spend. You'd expect the opposite. You'd expect people to spend cautiously at first, then draw down faster as the years pass. Instead, spending often shrinks the longer people are retired. The 85-year-old is usually spending less than the 68-year-old, even though they have more years of savings behind them and fewer years left to use it. So what's actually happening? For decades, economists assumed people would behave like the life cycle hypothesis predicted. That idea, developed by the economist Franco Modigliani in the 1950s, said people should smooth their spending across their entire life, save while working, then draw that money back down in retirement, aiming to spend nearly everything by the time they die. It's a clean, rational model, and real retirees almost never follow it. Economists even have a name for the mismatch. It's called the annuity puzzle. The observation that retirees behave far more cautiously with their money than any rational spending model says they should. You saved for 40 years. You built the number, and then, when it's finally time to use it, something in you refuses to let go. Part of the explanation is math anxiety, dressed up as prudence. Financial advisor William Bengen popularized the 4% rule in the 1990s, a guideline suggesting retirees could withdraw 4% of their portfolio in the first year of retirement, adjust for inflation annually, and have a very high probability their money would last 30 years. It was meant as a floor, a conservative starting point, not a spending ceiling. But somewhere along the way, an entire generation of savers turned it into a hard limit, then quietly withdrew even less than that, just to be safe. Being safe sounds smart, but there's a cost to it that doesn't show up on any account statement. Let's walk through what that actually looks like. Picture a retiree with $500,000 saved at 65. Following the 4% rule, they could withdraw around $20,000 in year one, adjusting upward with inflation each year after. If the markets perform reasonably, nothing extraordinary, just historically normal returns, that retiree doesn't run out at 85 or 95. In a large share of historical scenarios, they end up with more money than they started with. Not less. More. 30 years of modest withdrawals, and the portfolio often grows faster than it shrinks. Morningstar's head of retirement research, David Blanchett, studied how retirees actually spend money over time and found something he called the retirement spending smile. Spending is relatively high in the go-go years right after retirement, dips through the middle slow-go years as people naturally do less, and then often rises again near the end of life due to healthcare costs. But even accounting for that late-life uptick, most retirees are still spending far below what their portfolio could sustainably support. They're not pacing themselves toward zero. They're pacing themselves toward leaving a mountain behind. A survey by the Society of Actuaries asked retirees to rank their biggest fears. Outliving their savings consistently ranks above the fear of death itself. Read that again. People are more afraid of running out of money than they are of dying. That single data point explains almost everything else in this video. Why would anyone build a fortune and then refuse to touch it? This is where the psychology gets interesting. The behavioral economists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky described a principle called loss sauce aversion. The finding that losing money hurts roughly twice as much, psychologically, as gaining the same amount feels good. Watching your retirement balance shrink, even when it's shrinking exactly as planned, triggers the same emotional alarm as an actual financial loss. Your brain doesn't distinguish between, I'm spending down savings I built for exactly this purpose, and I am losing money. It just registers the number going down, and it panics. Richard Thaler, another pioneer of behavioral economics, described a related habit called mental accounting, the tendency to treat money differently depending on which mental bucket it sits in, even when a dollar is a dollar. Retirement savings get filed away in the brain as untouchable, sacred, a number you protect rather than a resource you use. So even when spending it is exactly what the money was for, some part of the brain still treats every withdrawal as a small act of destruction. There's also a simpler, more human fear underneath all of this. Nobody knows exactly how long they'll live. The 2008 financial crisis is still fresh in the memory of a huge portion of today's retirees. A reminder that markets can fall 30–40% in a matter of months. So people build in a buffer, then another buffer on top of that buffer. And because nobody wants to be the retiree who runs out of money at 88, with a decade of expenses still ahead, the buffer never gets smaller. It only gets treated as insurance, permanently. Compare two versions of that same retiree with $500,000. Version 1 withdraws the full, planned 4%, adjusted for inflation every year, exactly as intended. Version 2 feels nervous every time the market dips, so they quietly withdraw 2% instead, telling themselves they're just being careful. Over 30 years, version 1 lives on roughly $20,000 a year that grows with inflation, takes the trips, helps the grandkids, fixes the roof without agonizing over it, and in most historical markets, still leaves a 6 or 7-figure balance behind. Version 2 lives on half that income for 3 decades, quietly shrinking their own life by a huge margin, and ends up leaving behind an even larger balance they never intended to keep. The safe choice didn't protect version 2 from anything real. It just made 30 years smaller than they had to be. There is a partial fix that researchers who study the annuity puzzle keep coming back to: guaranteed income. When part of a retirement portfolio is converted into a pension, Social Security bridge, or income annuity, something interesting happens to the psychology, not just the math. Retirees with a guaranteed monthly check tend to spend the rest of their discretionary savings more freely, because the fear of running out completely is handled by that guaranteed floor. The annuity doesn't just create income. It gives the brain permission to stop treating every withdrawal as a threat. But here's the twist almost nobody wants to hear. Excess caution isn't free. Every year you underspend out of fear isn't a year you protected. It's a year you didn't fully live. The trip you didn't take because the number felt risky to spend. The help you didn't give your kids when they actually needed it. Choosing instead to leave it to them after you're gone, when they'll need it less. The home repairs you delayed, the health choices you skipped. The version of retirement you pictured for 40 years while working, quietly shrunk down to fit inside. A fear that, statistically, almost never comes true. Warren Buffett has spent decades reminding investors that the biggest risk isn't usually the market crashing, it's people making emotional decisions based on fear instead of evidence. The same principle applies here, just pointed in a different direction. The risk retirees actually face isn't spending too much. For the overwhelming majority, it's spending too little, for too long, out of a fear that the data simply doesn't support. Now bring this back to you, wherever you are in that timeline. Maybe retirement is decades away, and this all still feels abstract. But the instinct starts now, not at 65. It's the same instinct that makes you keep working a job you've outgrown because leaving feels risky. The same instinct that has you saving a little more every year, without ever asking what all that saving is actually for. Money isn't the goal. It was never the goal. It's the tool that was supposed to buy you something. Time, options, a version of your life you actually wanted to live. A number sitting untouched in an account isn't evidence of a plan working. Sometimes it's evidence of a life quietly deferred. Think about your own version of the buffer. Maybe it's the emergency fund that's grown 3 times larger than any emergency you've ever had. Maybe it's the vacation you keep pricing out and never booking, because some vague future expense might need that money more. Maybe it's the number you've told yourself you need to hit before you'll finally feel comfortable. A number that, when you actually reached it, somehow moved further away instead of closer. Fear is a moving target. It doesn't get satisfied by more money. It gets satisfied by evidence, and the evidence again and again points the other way. You are far more likely to underlive than to run out. None of this means recklessness is the answer. Nobody is telling you to ignore your budget or stop planning. The 4% rule exists for a reason, and having a cushion matters. The point is narrower than that, and more uncomfortable. The version of caution most people practice isn't actually protecting them from a real, likely outcome. It's protecting them from a story. One built from 2008. From a parent who ran out of money. From a fear that never got checked against what the research actually shows. You'll open that account again next year. The number will probably be bigger. And this time, maybe the question worth asking isn't how you protect it. It's what you built it for in the first place.